Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Niko Vuori. Today, we are talking about one of the big topics that many developers hold up as a holy grail for the future, and that is the notion of interoperability between different apps and games, of course. Interoperability is a big word, and one that I find quite hard to pronounce. So I have been somewhat dreading this episode, as I will no doubt massacre the pronunciation of the word interoperable numerous times. But it is a really exciting topic of conversation, and one that holds, in my opinion, real promise for a more integrated future for apps and games and their respective economies and ecosystems, going way beyond the walled gardens we're so used to up until this point. So to talk more about this topic, we have two amazing guests on the pod who are both blazing a trail towards a more interoperable future and have started working together on this promise. Our first guest is Alex Paley. He is the founder and CEO of Faraway Games. They are the developer of Mini Royale Nations, which is an open economy first-person shooter with about 400,000 monthly active players. So legit game with a lot of activity going on. And they also have an integration with the Solana blockchain, which we'll be touching on in this episode too. Alex, welcome to the pod.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And our second guest is Timmu Toke. He's the founder and CEO of Ready Player Me, which is a cross-game avatar platform for virtual worlds and the metaverse more broadly. Timmu, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, great to be here.
All right. And the reason Alex and Timmu are here is because they recently announced a very exciting partnership between their respective companies, which enables Mini Royale and Ready Player Me avatars to play nice with each other. In other words, they are now interoperable. And we're going to dive into what this actually means in real life for these two companies and what it means more broadly for the ecosystem in this episode, because this is somewhat groundbreaking to have two companies working together so closely to create worlds that actually interact with each other. So with that introduction out of the way, let's get right into it. And we're going to start with just a little bit of background on each of you. We're going to start with Alex. What is Faraway Games doing with your flagship game, Mini Royale Nations? And what does interoperability actually mean to you? It means different things to different people. What does it mean to you specifically?
Yeah, so basically at Faraway, almost everything we do right now is focused on interoperability, like whether that's visual interoperability, economic interoperability, cross-game events, and stuff like that. So what it means for Mini Royale specifically is we demoed what visual interoperability looks like with this Ready Player Me integration. So all of the Season 4 avatars, so in Mini Royale, we're in Season 4 right now, all of those Mini Royale Season 4 avatars are playable and earnable both inside of Mini Royale, and they're now usable in Timmu, is it 6,000 or 7,000 other experiences right now? Yes, 7,000 other experiences, which is absolutely wild because it gives now almost unlimited value for the assets that our players own. So they spend all of this time getting this amazing character from Mini Royale, and now they can take it to all of these other virtual worlds. So we're definitely demoing a lot what visual interoperability means. And then we're also trying to showcase what economic interoperability means. So we put up a game called Faraway Land, which has like economic interoperability with Mini Royale. It's like a base builder, like farm simulator type of game. And you produce things in that game. You produce gear in that game, which you then equip on your Mini Royale characters. And in Mini Royale, you produce currency that you can then use inside of Faraway Land. So it's not in the visual layer, but it still showcases another side of interoperability that was just very interesting to our players.
And we're going to unpack, so that's great. We're going to unpack a lot of what you just said there later on in the episode. We're going to go deeper into each of the layers, peel the onion, so to speak, as we talk about visual interoperability, economic interoperability, and there might be other factors as well, which I'm really eager to talk to you about as well. So let's do the same thing for Timmu here. So Ready Player Me as a company and a product actually predates this latest wave, and I believe actually Faraway Games does as well, but predates this wave of recent Web3 enthusiasm by quite a few years. I believe you were founded back in 2014, almost a decade ago now. And as you just mentioned, you already work with 7,000 developers. Tell us more about what Ready Player Me actually is, and then what made you jump into the Web3 waters more recently, and when did you do so?
Yeah, totally. So when we started 9 years ago, more than 9 years ago, we basically saw that people will spend, the bet we made was that people will spend more and more time in games and in virtual worlds over time. Why we got specifically, especially excited 9 years ago was because Oculus was acquired by Facebook, and we thought that VR is going to happen immediately. And avatars are going to play a huge role in VR, and someone needs to develop great avatars and make it easy for people to create avatars. That's what we started 9 years ago, building hardware scanners initially, and then like custom building avatar tech for many big gaming companies like Tencent and Wargaming and HTC and so forth. So, and then eventually we built Ready Player Me 3 years ago. So, and with Ready Player Me, our goal is basically to connect virtual worlds and kind of push the world towards a more open and decentralized metaverse. And we do that by creating interoperable avatars. So for end users, for a player, we're an avatar that travels with you across many different virtual worlds. And not just an avatar, like we also work with other avatars. We're more like a Rails and a platform that makes avatars travel, whatever avatar you pick. And then from a developer's point of view, when you're building a new game from scratch, for example, you need to build an avatar system. And building a decent one takes 6 months or even a year or more if you want to do it well, and if you want to monetize it well and so forth. And we take that pain away. We give developers an end-to-end avatar solution they can integrate easily with your game and basically focus on what they do best. And then the avatar and assets they create are interoperable, and they can take part of the interoperable network, and they can sell assets that work across many games instead of just their game, and so forth. So working both with developers and end users, currently focused on the developer part. So like building great tools, working with a lot of games and virtual worlds that need avatars, or with Faraway, we were kind of pushing the limit of what's possible with Ready Player Me, and then like really made Faraway or mini real avatars travel across worlds, which is kind of like the direction we want to go long term. And that was the first time we really did it properly. So that was really cool to see. And I think that's the first time like avatars from a game are actually usable in many other games. So that was very exciting to work on.
Yeah, it was sort of wild, right? You have this thing that's you have on your mini royale home screen. Now all of a sudden, it looks exactly the same, but it's a third person perspective. It's running around, it's jumping in a way that you couldn't do in mini royale. So I think interoperability is one of these like weird things where you think it doesn't matter or isn't possible, like until you actually see it. And then you realize like it's really possible, and it sort of really does matter, because it just made, me as like a buyer of those assets, I was like, I would pay so much more to have something that could travel like anywhere. Like internally, we always use this example of I buy a Ferrari, but it's only, I can only drive it inside of this tiny little city. I can only drive it in Baltimore. Something like that. It's not a tiny little city. It's another city. But obviously that Ferrari is going to be worth a lot less than a Ferrari I could drive, everywhere. Right. Yep. So I think the same thing applies to avatars.
Yeah, it actually brings nicely to my next planned question, which is really just kind of hitting it bluntly on the head here, which is, we talked about interoperability. We as an industry talk about it all the time, and we hold it up as a paragon for what we could be and what we should be in many ways. Interoperability is a good thing. It's spoken of at least. But what is it about interoperability? You've touched a little bit on it here, but what is it about interoperability that actually makes games better? Why does it matter that I can take? And we're going to talk about the visual part here specifically. We can talk about the economic part later on in this episode. Why does it matter that I can take my avatar or my visual identity from one game to another?
I think for the player, like it is inherently better. Like if the player prizes ownership right, of their items that they either paid a lot for or grinded a lot for, clearly they're going to want those items to be usable in as many places as possible. Just like if I went and bought that Ferrari, I would want that Ferrari to be drivable in as many cities as possible. So I think like when it comes down to it, all we do as game developers is we cater to the players. Like, what is the absolute best experience that way we can create for our players? And usually that best experience and that best game design wins out in the long run.
Timmu, your thoughts?
So,
yeah, totally. I mean, I think when you look at the kind of industry as a whole, then like interoperability also protects us from kind of a big monopoly player coming around and like, taking most of the market and making all the rules. That's kind of like, that's a possibility that, Meta or someone like that somehow figures out to build, a metaverse that everybody spends all their time in. And that's like another good feature. And the other feature is that we'll have a decentralized open metaverse that is more like the internet, where you can navigate between different worlds and you have kind of a consistent experience, and nobody really owns the whole thing. And for that to happen, there needs to be interoperability, and there need to be services and standards and protocols that help make it easy for people to navigate between those worlds. And this is just one part of that, but there are many things that need to happen to kind of get to that world, and like that will be a much better outcome than a more centralized world, or maybe as 5 big players that build a metaverse, and then that's where life exists. I think that's a good outcome.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that it's like interoperable games are going to replace, closed economy free-to-play games, just the same way that free-to-play games didn't completely replace like amazing single-player narrative-driven games. But I do think it will allow for new types of games to be made and new interesting types of game designs where there's cross-game events, like different games dripping different items from their own experiences. And then who knows, like you can do cross-game crafting. Timmu, this is something that we've talked about before. Like game A drops item A, game B drops item B. In game C, you use items A and B and you create this amazing sword or shield or whatever that is really usable there. So just new types of games I think will be made.
Exactly. And just like to add one thing that Alex, you touched on as well, is like, we believe that if you build like an open economy around the avatars that exists, next to a lot of different games, then as a developer, if you're part of that economy, you can actually monetize your game better as well. It's like, as an end user, would you rather pay for something that is stuck in one game or usable across thousands of games and games you care about? I think it's obvious that it will like increase the value of the assets people buy, and then it will increase the whole economy around avatars. So as a developer, it's like if you want to build a very kind of controlled, guided, kind of a story-driven experience, you probably want to build your own like closed world, because you want to control every part and it's a story. But if it's more like social and open and metaverse-y kind of experience, then it makes sense for that to be open.
Yeah, which is how I think more games are trending, right? It's like every game wants to be social, because everybody knows the more social your game is, the longer it lasts. But you want to play games where your friends are.
Yeah, so I'm definitely buying what you guys are selling here. And to be clear, I'm a big believer in this future. And I actually agree with you guys wholeheartedly that I don't think it's going to replace closed economy games. I don't, just the same way that, free-to-play didn't replace, paid for games. I think it's a perfect analogy there. I think there's just more and more ways of playing together and separately that are being invented all the time. And, blockchain enables some of those, interoperability enables some of those. But I will play devil's advocate for just a moment here and talk a little bit about, what makes closed game economies and ecosystems arguably better than open economy games or open, game ecosystems. The one thing that they have going for them is the developer can control every single aspect of the player or the user experience, right? It could be more on rails. You mentioned maybe narrative-driven games being a bucket of gaming that perhaps is suited better for that. And so my question to you guys is, if you're opening up the experience for the visual element, the avatars from other developers, or maybe other types of interoperability with, game A with item A, game B, item B, game C, combining A and B, which to me is really, really cool. But it definitely could harm the user experience, arguably, because you are no longer in control as a developer of the entire user experience. And of course, Apple is famous for controlling, vertical integration, the hardware, the software, everything in the stack. So how do you think about the risks or potential negative effects of interoperability, and how do they weigh up against the positive? You've touched on a couple, but I just want to hit this head on, because that is the one thing you give up as a developer. You give up control of the user experience in exchange for this more social, interoperable world.
And I think you get a more interesting economy that exists. Like you get something that's much closer to the real world, where you have a bunch of like disparate parties all making items, and you have these complex supply chains that rely on different items created by different people. So I totally agree with you that like there are some games that you're just going to want a closed economy for, because it's going to, for that type of game, like where maybe it's like God of War, it needs to be like a very curated, narrative driven type of game. Like you're not going to want that in an interoperable type of game. But if you want something, a game that has like a much more complex economy that mimics like almost like IRL types of reactions or types of interactions, you're going to want to make your items like interoperable, so you can have different people producing different things and all interacting together in a series of virtual worlds. So I think it's going to be better. I think it's just to be different types of games, different types of game designs, and different ways that people are going to like interact with each other. Like I just quickly, one thing that I think we'll see happen is I think we will see games like selling other people's items. Like just the way in the real world, right? You have department stores like Bloomingdale's, they sell other clothing brands. Like Bloomingdale's sells Gucci, and Bloomingdale's probably wouldn't be as successful if it didn't sell Gucci, right? And
yeah.
in these games, it could be like I'm selling an item in Mini Royale that Timmu makes, and that's like a game. Now you as the game dev don't have to produce all the content yourself, and now you're taking a seller fee for facilitating that sale for the other brand. So I think we'll see, like I said, new types of monetization, new types of game designs. But yeah.
Yeah. And Timmu, you're working with 7,000 developers now, so you obviously have a kind of a bird's eye view, or God mode view of what's going on in this ecosystem. Obviously, this is a fairly new integration or really partnership that you've got with Faraway. But what are you seeing from your 7,000 developers in your ecosystem? What are they asking for? What are they seeing in terms of compromises or trade-offs between the more open, interoperable worlds that we're talking about here versus the closed game economies?
Yeah. So I mean, there are games that are more like playgrounds where you want to almost give as much freedom as possible, or like a good amount of freedom, and then see what people come up with. And all the kind of UGC driven games are also, kind of in that way. And what they're trying to do is to like make it more open and more free in their economy or in their ecosystem rather. Rather than the reverse. So like I think that's what's like that's why Roblox and Fortnite and all those things are interesting and very kind of long lasting. So there are playgrounds, and then there's like there are stories, or like a very story based games. Like those are not our partners. If you're building a story, you want to have a very curated experience. Like you want to control every part. God of War, for example. But those games might want to export assets. So you can also be interoperable kind of like one way. It could be like if someone wants to buy assets from here and use it in other games, like that's cool. Like that makes the assets more valuable still. And maybe there's some other games that are not so good at selling assets, but they're happy to import them along with a user that comes from the other game or whatever. So like there's like there can be different levels of interoperability. You don't need to like be like fully open and allow any kinds of assets in. There can be, for visual interoperability, there can be dress codes. Like, there are only certain kinds of assets you allow to come into a world, and so forth. So, yeah, there are levels. And then there's different approaches. Like if you're building a playground, you're more open to experimenting. But I think like generally, there's not enough examples and data on like what will happen when you open up your economy of your existing game. So, with the early group of people that are kind of open metaverse minded and are like philosophically aligned with, open metaverse and all that stuff, with that group, our goal is to basically kind of prove to the rest of the industry that it actually improves your game. It builds a better user experience. It, makes your game easier to monetize and so forth. And then eventually it needs to become like a no-brainer business decision for people to join or open up, because it's just like, it makes sense. And yeah, there's probably some games it makes more sense for than others and so forth. But we're all in this and trying to figure it out. And I think it's obvious that if it will be open, it will be beneficial for everyone.
This notion of UGC is fascinating to me. The idea that you could be creating assets in a game that makes it really easy to create those assets and then either exporting those to another game or using them in another game or selling them inside another game. It arguably opens up a whole new vector for the creator economy to evolve for folks who are really passionate about a certain game and then want to kind of give those assets that they're creating in that game a life beyond that walled garden. Talk to me a little bit more about how you are enabling that. Maybe we start with Timmu on this one, because it seems like you're in a pretty good position with these 7,000 developers to actually tap into that. I'm fascinated how you would make that work in real life. And do you have any examples yet? Sounds like maybe not, maybe it's still too early, but something that you guys are at least thinking about, if not actively working on.
Yeah. So we are working on it, and we actually, we're working with a lot of brands, for example. There are also creators of avatar assets, and we work with some individual creators. And, from a brand's perspective, for example, before, like, in order to make your stuff usable in games, you would have to go to individual games and make a deal with them, create assets in their spec, go through this whole thing for each game, which is like not doable. So you could only do it with the biggest games, and that's like limited. So now they can come to ReadyPremi as a creator or as a brand, and they can get access to thousands of different experiences with just one integration by creating one asset. So the open kind of metaverse and interoperability is definitely very beneficial for anyone creating content for avatars in our case, but like in general. The more usable the content is across games, the more valuable it is, and the more people there are that could potentially buy that stuff. And then it's that's how we think about it. Like, just opening it up is going to give creators more access to that economy.
And Alex, I want to hear your perspective as a developer specifically. I mean, this is kind of what we're talking about here. This partnership is literally that. It's the avatars.
So we're
assets.
doing this.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm saying. So I want to hear.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's like, if you go to faraway.com and there's like a become a creator tab, you can literally submit assets. Like, a creator can submit assets for Mini Royale, and in Mini Royale, we will be selling like creators' assets, and then the creator gets, obviously their fee every single time it sells. But the way that we talk to creators about this is saying, like, you're submitting assets. They are going to be used, of course, like in Mini Royale, they can be bought in Mini Royale, but they're also used in many other experiences. So you're not just creating this asset for Mini Royale, you're creating an asset that'll be used in an increasingly large number of places. So for the creator, it's sort of a no-brainer, where they're like, okay, like I don't need a Roblox type of scale, right? I need to create an amazing asset, and I can count on the fact that the bigger this universe of interoperable games and interoperable experiences becomes, the more valuable that asset becomes. So we have so many people that like took some of our characters and they made like Ronald McDonald versions. We have some we have like some horror movie versions of some of our characters that I see. And of course we have versions of our characters that I'm heavily moderating and saying, maybe not this time.
No.
We're not going to let that one in. But it's cool because it just like it changes the paradigm for a creator, because they're not just making something for a specific game. They're making this like evergreen asset that will have increasing utility the more and more games use it. And what we're obviously seeing is more and more games, 7,000 developers is nothing to sneeze at all. It's a massive number. And Timmu, you can probably speak to just how quickly that number is increasing. But say it gets to 10,000, 20,000, it's a massive, massive value proposition for creators.
It will be 10,000 soon.
It's wild.
We added like 800 new companies last month.
That's very impressive.
There we go.
It's actually touching nicely on. So, Timmu, I want you to talk a little bit about your Avatar API. I believe you launched it in October 2022. How does it actually work? I'm presuming it's making this asset creation just a lot easier for developers. I'm presuming that there are other things beyond just avatars that you guys are thinking about. In-game assets that are non-avatars, like items that have functionality, potions, consumables potentially instead of just durables. So tell me more about what is your vision for kind of the API-ification of asset creation, starting with avatars and going from there.
Yeah. So, we plan to be avatar focused for a long time. It's a very hard problem to solve on its own. And to create avatars that work in all kinds of different experiences is very hard. And that's why, I'm going to talk about the avatar API as well. But one more comment on that, it says the avatar is like a naturally persistent part of many experiences or virtual experiences you go to. If you go to weapons and potions and all these other things, then they have very different utility in different games. And what if you go from a racing game to a whatever medieval game? It's a very hard thing to manage. Maybe we'll get there eventually, but right now we're focused on avatars and kind of the identity slightly beyond avatars. But an avatar API. So why interoperability is so hard is because every game has their own technical spec, their own way they create avatars, their own needs for avatars, so their own animation rig and so forth. So the avatar API basically serves the avatar in the spec that the developer needs for their game. So you can have the right LOD, you can have the right rig, animation rig, you can control a lot of different things around the avatar to get what you need as a developer. If you're building for mobile shooter, it's very different from a desktop Unreal, whatever game. So it kind of gives the developer a lot of flexibility. So the avatar we actually deliver into different games is very different game to game, technically. But for the user, it looks the same, it feels the same. The avatar API is also delivering the faraway avatars into different games based on what these games need, in the LODs and so forth. That will be body shapes and things like that will deliver to the avatar API. So even the characters you import, you can modify to your identity and so forth. So it just gives developers a lot of flexibility and really makes interoperability easy or doable. And we've been working on avatars for 9 years. That was the kind of latest major upgrade.
So we focus a lot on visual interoperability. Obviously, talking about avatars here. I want to. And we've scratched the surface a little bit on some of this other types of interoperability, whether it be economic interoperability or otherwise. I want to dig into that a little bit. And so this is more of a question for Alex, I think. As a developer, you and I have talked in the past about this notion of economic interoperability, between different game economies, not just the UGC, hey, I'm a creator, I'm creating an asset, I can now sell it or use it in multiple different games, but actually transferring economic value, in-game currency from game to game. Tell us more about what that means to you. And obviously, there are tons of risk associated with having other developers potentially touch your economy and vice versa. What do you envision for this future of economic interoperability?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of risks, which is why we've demoed it ourselves. So we have Mini Royale interacting with Faraway Land. Like I was saying, Faraway Land produces gear. Gear can then be equipped on your Mini Royale heroes, and it gives them increasing power. And power is something that there's season leaderboards for. This is not it doesn't play into the in-battle experience, but power has other types of benefits inside of the Mini Royale meta. So I think we're experimenting with more and more stuff around that, but you can say like game A produces item A, and inside of Mini Royale, you want to say, you know what, this item, you need this to unlock this quest, right? Or you need this to join this clan, or you need this to get a boost in this, raid. And you can choose, like, as the game dev, how you want to ascribe value to other games' items. And I think it just makes things really, really interesting. And it'll also allows you to grab other communities that you might have not been able to grab before, right? So, I'm working together with another game right now. Like, all of a sudden, the community that was very centered around that game now all of a sudden cares about Mini Royale because there's use for that item inside of Mini Royale, or maybe Mini Royale sources the item for that other game. And everybody needs to play Mini Royale to go get the item that's used in this other game. So I think it creates like really interesting, like I said, types of game designs, allows for much more of this, like these cross game events, like cross game collaboration. And the cool thing is, like, once everything is on chain, like, it's permissionless anyway. So I don't need to work with, some other studio. I can just say, you know what, this is a cool item. All Bored Apes, like, come in here and you can play this quest, because maybe I want to grab that community. And I say that community matters for Mini Royale. But Niko, like you said, there's a lot of risks. I think the biggest thing that we've been focused on is an item can only be sourced from one place. Right? We're restricting it. It can be spent, or it can be given utility, or utility can be given to it in multiple different experiences, but it can only be sourced from a single place. And then obviously that place can control how much they want to inflate the supply of that specific item. So we don't right now, and I don't think for the foreseeable future, we'll have a scenario where like the same item is sourced in more than one place, because I think that gives, like, then you start entering the danger zone on on item inflation. But if you keep it centered, like where one experience is the source of a single item, then I think you're safe. And it's like a more measured response to creating like interoperable items.
One thing you brought up here, which I'm glad you did, and I wanted to talk about this as well, which is what role does blockchain technology or technologies and NFTs, permissionless, decentralized, what do those have to offer? The debate about interoperability. Does it? I know, Alex. Maybe we continue with you here a little bit, because I know you're building on blockchain, you're building on Solana. What are your thoughts on how blockchain and decentralization impact this discussion about interoperability? You mentioned the permissionless nature as a starting point. What else does blockchain offer for game economies and ecosystems as it relates to interoperability between different experiences?
Yeah, like one, I mean, the blockchain is just this big open, like, distributed database, right? So everything exists there, and no single like company can say, I'm going to take it away, right? So I think that's important. So for a player, right, if you have this interoperable asset, you never have to worry about the company that made the experience where that asset came from. Like, that company can't take it away once it's on chain. And if you look at like our Ready Player Me integration, like, it really wasn't like that much of an integration. I mean, it was rather straightforward, because all we did is we took our Mini Royale like NFT. We said, you know what, we're going to add a link to the 3D model file that is associated with that avatar. Like, all the user is going to do is they're going to go to the Phantom Wallet like extension on the Ready Player Me site on that pop-up. They're going to connect their Phantom Wallet, and the avatars that they own are going to be playable there. And it would have been like such a crazier integration if these things weren't all on chain and a person could just log in and Ready Player Me could read like, okay, you have this item, cool. Like, we have all the information we need to display it, and that's it. So yeah, I think doing this like the Web 2 way would have required such a crazier integration that it might have not even made sense, and it definitely wouldn't have scaled to 7,000 or 10,000 other experiences.
Yeah, Timmu, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this too, because it seems like, at least from Alex's perspective, it's almost critical to have the blockchain technology underlying a lot of this stuff in order to actually scale. Tell me more about how you guys are thinking about it at Ready Player Me, and how are you using blockchain technology to help this scale?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, like when you think about just the problem that needs to get solved for interoperability, it's like there's an asset, and the ownership of that asset needs to be stored in some kind of database, and the asset needs to be stored in some kind of database. And if the asset is used by 1,000 companies, for example, then what, like, whose database are we going to use? So like, it makes sense to have like a distributed database, blockchain, and store the ownership and the assets there. So all these 1,000 companies can just tap into it and then use the assets in their games in the way they want. So I think like this is the only way that makes sense. I mean, the other way is that there's a centralized provider like ReadyPremi that basically uses their database to like make those assets travel. And that's like true for some assets that are not blockchain assets on ReadyPremi today. But long term, we want to be the facilitator for those assets to travel and not the main database necessarily. So like blockchain is the best way to basically solve that problem. Have that kind of shared database that nobody really controls and everyone can tap into.
Now, the natural follow-on question there is, what about cross-chain? And, it's one thing to have the Solana ecosystem all be tapping into that air quotes database, i.e. The Solana blockchain. Mm-hmm. What about ETH? What about Polygon? What about Aptos? Well, there are lots of we talked about the walled gardens. Blockchain is arguably a series of open walled gardens, if you get my gist. There, the cross-chain element is quite hard to do still to this day. How do you guys think about that cross-chain element? Is it something that you worry yourselves about, or is it something that
I can speak? Yeah. I can speak to it. Yeah. So I mean, at the end of April, Mini Royale is going cross-chain, so it'll support Solana NFTs and it'll support Ethereum NFTs, like 721s. And I asked Timmu, like, "Hey, is this going to work?" And he's like, "Yeah, like, you know what? This, Ethereum uses this NFT standard, Solana uses this NFT standard, but they both have metadata. And as long as the metadata has a link or has like some way for Ready Player Me to see this is the GLB file, like this is the 3D model file associated with that character, that's it. We're done. And now the Ethereum NFTs that we're going to mint on April 27th, according if everything goes to plan, those will be immediately playable in Ready Player Me's 7,000 experiences. Yep. So it's just everything, regardless of the chain. Like the chains all have NFTs, and those NFTs all have metadata.
So we basically support several wallets, and whenever you connect your wallet and have Ready Player Me compatible NFTs in your wallet, and we just make those assets usable on your avatar.
Wow. I'm impressed. This,
Crosschain
cool. It really is very cool. I mean, Crosschain has been one of those big challenges up until this point, and it sounds like, at least for this use case, you guys are, tackling it head on and able to actually support that. So I'm very impressed.
Yeah, and I think for a creator, a creator might want to, deploy their item on a different chain, right? So who cares? This item has this metadata, and that's all Timmu and Ready Player Me needs to see. So it's very, very different.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of coming to the end of my questions here because we've talked about a lot here, but I do want to touch on what's next for both of you guys. Obviously, the sky's the limit in terms of what we could do with interoperability. This is a very noble, very worthy, very exciting first step towards that visual interoperability piece. What are you working on next? Let's start with Timmu. What are your initiatives moving the ball forward and up the pitch?
Yeah. So what we're really focused on now is building tools to make it easy for developers to create content for avatars, and developers and creators. So skins, full avatars, avatar accessories, and things like that that they can sell, and that developers can sell in their games, that creators can create, that developers then sell in their games. And that's like content, which also leads to monetization, which is like helping developers make money with avatars. And then the larger, the bigger kind of goal is to just create more proof points for interoperability, to onboard more kind of traditional studios that weren't originally open metaverse minded, and just join because it's a no-brainer business decision. I think that's kind of a good place for the industry to get to, is where we go beyond the kind of like early open metaverse, like to people that are philosophically aligned with that, to like a more kind of a rational business decision, or like a no-brainer business decision because you have enough data and so forth. So that's kind of like what we're working towards.
Alex.
And I guess, yes, for us, like the big thing on like the Mini Royale side of things is really this creator program, like the ability for creators to make interoperable assets and use those in Mini Royale and then a bunch of other places. And I think the one other area where the blockchain is pretty critical is in payouts, like multi-party payouts, where the creator needs to get paid, Faraway needs to get paid, a seller needs to get paid, the referrer needs to get paid. And we're able to do that because everything is, on chain and done through smart contracts with zero overhead. Like if I was trying to do this back at Scopely, right, it would be the accounting department would probably, go crazy at me because they'd be sending out wires for $1, right, to a bunch of different parties, and it just doesn't scale, right? So this is a way. The blockchain is a way for us to scale a creator program, get creators to make like awesome interoperable assets, but also get them paid every single time something sells immediately, and all parties paid. So on like the Mini Royale side of things, it's really all about creators and like UGC. And then we recently did this announcement around like Serum City, which is a game we're making inside of like the Mutant Ape Yacht Club like universe. It's like in partnership with the Mutant Cartel team, and that'll feature like interoperability, but inside of like the Yugaverse. So there'll be some cool things coming up with items produced in Serum City that'll be usable in other games besides, or other experience besides just Serum City. So everything we do, right, is just focused around like interoperability, and it might not be visual interoperability in that case. It might be more economic interoperability, but like our belief is that items should have value outside of the game that they were, originated in. And what we're trying to do is initially create those experiences, showcase like what happens, like when you allow for this type of interoperability, what types of game designs are possible, how players react in new and emergent ways. And then we're hoping that other people also like make really cool designs that can interact with our economies in ways that we never expect. So yeah, those are the two big things for us.
Awesome.
And the Faraway platform really like enables the economic interoperability, and we plan to do some stuff as well. But cool. Yeah, that's very cool.
More stuff coming, more and more announcements coming from both of us.
I love it. The teaser. We'll have to have you guys come back and talk more about what comes next. But I think we're almost certainly got a lot of developers listening to this and thinking, okay, I'd like to participate. How can they? We'll put all the links in the show notes, of course. Timmu, like if developers want to get in touch and get that 7,000 number to 10,000, working with you, where do they go and how do they reach out?
Yeah, ReadyPlayerMe, ReadyPlayer.me. That's like the website, and then the docs and everything is there. The developer sign up is there. It's very easy to get started. Download the SDKs and check the docs. You can always track me down from LinkedIn, for example. I'm sometimes slow to answer, but I'll try my best. And yeah, like everything is on the website basically for developers.
Fantastic. Alex, same question for you. Creators and or developers.
Faraway.com. Like you can read all about all of the different cool things we have going on. And then if you want to reach me, I'm pretty good on Twitter. I try to respond the best I can. It's apaley13. But yeah, like would love to chat with like other developers and also creators. Like the crazy thing is if a creator makes something and that thing is on the Ready Player Me like avatar rig, that thing is automatically playable in Mini Royale, like instantly. So like we want more and more creators to realize this and realize that the content they make is going to be seen like instantly by hundreds of thousands or millions of players. So like please, if you're a developer or if you're an amazing artist, 3D modeler, like animator, like please make cool content and let's get it in as many cool places as possible.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, I really wanted to have you guys on because this is such an interesting topic. And again, we're barely scratching the surface of what's possible. I agree with, I think, Alex, I think you both made this point early in the episode, which is this is not going to replace air quotes, traditional gaming, but it could very well augment it in a really interesting way and become a very large niche for certain genres of games. So I'm really excited to see what you guys do next. And I'm really excited to see more developers, more creators get involved in these types of initiatives. So that about wraps it up. Alex, Timmu, thank you so much for coming on the pod today. Again, love the insights. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes. And I have one of my favorite expressions is a rising tide lifts all boats.
That's right.
And what I'm seeing from you guys is very much in that vein of trying to elevate everybody in this ecosystem through the use of new and exciting technologies and partnerships. So Alex, thank you for being on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And also, if there's any other games that want to run cross-game events or do experiments with interoperable economies, like let's do it. I'm very much so down.
Gauntlet has been thrown. Timmu, also thank you to you for being on the pod.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a great chat. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Niko.
Awesome. And also, of course, a big thank you to all of our listeners. We will be back next week with more interviews, more insights, and more analysis from the weird and wonderful world of Web3 and gaming more broadly. So until next time, friends, stay crypto curious and feel free to send questions, guest recommendations, and comments to me. My email is nico@naavik.co, and you can find me on Twitter @NicoTheFin. DMs are always open. Until next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, level up your insights with our premium research platform, Naavik Pro, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.